Hi, everybody, and welcome to TNM Coaching Unplugged, the podcast that explores transformational ideas, leadership, and power coaching. I'm your host, Zoran Todorovic, and today we have this exciting elevation, really profound conversation ahead of us. We will be diving into essential topic of letting go of uncertainty, embracing ambiguity, and we will explore how does this power our growth in this world fulfilled or filled with consistent change, ambiguity, and being able to embrace ambiguity rather than fear it is a critical leadership skill. I would say this is a skill for life that fuels our personal and professional growth and transformation. Our today's guest is Simon Hample. Simon has established Sarsin, which is with clear and inspiring purpose, and I love his purpose from his website, to create greater connection, balance, and harmony with ourselves and the world around us. Through his work, Simon provides wisdom to answer our inner yearning to be safely authentic selves, to become our authentic selves, and also to become our authentic leaders. He has wealth of experience. He helps leaders navigate complexity, change, uncertainty, and unknown. He's very adventurous. I met Simon a long time ago when he was doing something really, really, really fantastic. We're going to get back into putting people into adventurous situation, traveling around the world, getting leaders to really learn from real life issues. He's super creative, in his work as well. And today we're going to explore how do we cultivate mindset that welcomes ambiguity, uncertainty. How do we unlock some of the new levels of performance, creativity, and resilience inside of ourselves to become this better version of ourselves as well. So Simon, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast, and welcome.
Thanks, Zoran. Really lovely to be here with you today.
Yeah, good. So you and I in preparation, we talked a little bit about this uncertainty and ambiguity, and we talked about your journey and connection into that as well. So I love when people come to this podcast that they share a little bit of themselves, because most of the time we're all curious about you. We get curious, of course, about topic. Yeah, and we love to learn from you, but we also want to learn a little bit about your life, where you are, and what is your relationship to this topic that we're discussing today.
Thank you, Zoran. I was so happy to share, and feel free to ask any question. Nothing's off limits. Look, I'm a 56-year-old father of a 7-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 2-year-old, and a lovely wife who's a doctor of Chinese medicine. So we have lots of uncertainty in our life, as you can imagine, chasing small children around the house. We live in West London. And I would say my journey, it feels like in my life, I've had many lives. It's a funny thing to say. I am in my 20s and 30s, ran my own businesses. I was lucky enough to have offices in London, New York, Monaco, Sydney, Vancouver. I had 4 companies, a bunch of investors, and one of them quite for the time, a reasonably big company. And I lost everything I had in my mid-30s, and I had a lot. And that was really hard. And I wasn't used to not succeeding. I didn't know that feeling. And so I had a very challenging time understanding what had happened for me. And I ended up moving to Spain and living in Seville, where I got there just by following my nose, because everything else was falling down around me. I actually went to Madrid and got mugged after a few days. So not only I lost everything, left my girlfriend in my house, I got to Madrid, got mugged, sort of biblical. And I went to a train station and I saw someone on the platform who had this very big smiley face. And I thought, wow, she's got amazing energy. She looks really happy. I want that. It's like, I want to steal that energy. So I went up to her and I said, do you speak English? And he went, yeah, I'm German. I said, well, I laughed and said, well, I didn't speak Spanish. Where have you come from? You look so happy. And she said, Sevilla. I said, oh, what's that like? And she said, warm, beautiful, romantic, and cheap. And she left like this angel, just left. Never saw her again. But I went to Seville, and in a day, Zoran, I had a job, place to stay, and a course in English. And for a year, I earned in a year what I used to pay myself in a week. And I had this incredible experience of life being so different. I worked in a bar and on tables. And so I went from, a 5-star lifestyle today, left an airplane, to serving coffees and teas and cleaning. And it was very humbling. And, of course, in retrospect, you learn the time it felt difficult and I was challenged, but I grew because Seville held me. I say that because I noticed that was a big moment in time for me to take stock. It was the first time I was able to reflect and consider the choices that I'd made. And from there, I then spent the next 10 years leading international NGOs. Because I suddenly discovered a sense of purpose. I never had purpose. I was good at leading, but I didn't know why I was leading. And between Seville and the first NGO, I went walkabout through Central and South America. I had air miles. One brother gave me a tent, other brother gave me a rucksack, and my sister gave me a sleeping bag. You don't lose air miles when you use your businesses. So I was able to navigate Central and South America. And I did that with my eyes wide open and saw life completely differently from having lived in cities all my life. I was suddenly living in the field of life. And I ended up falling into an expedition in the Amazon, as you do. Spent 3 months. And on the back of that, the organizers, who were a British charity, said, look, you're interesting. Why don't you come and work with us and lead us? You're good at leading and we'll train you up to lead expeditions. So I spent 4.5 years taking scientists and aid workers to remote parts of the world to do their research and aid in the Amazon, across Mongolia and the Gobi Desert, over the Himalayas, down the Blue Nile, all over the world. Boys' own adventure. And from that, I was invited to take the leadership of an international NGO tackling needless blindness. Some of the investors who had been part of my journey, I used to give talks to their investee companies around leadership because they said I'd seen both sides of the coin. And they said, hey, there's a charity tackling needless blindness and they want someone who's commercial, who's lived remotely. We think you'd be the right man. So I went and lived in hospitals in southern India, which is an amazing experience, very humbling again. Learned my trade, beautiful organization called Aravint, McDonald's of eye care, as they were described. And then took it as I could across parts of Africa and elsewhere in Southeast Asia, places like Rwanda and Congo and Angola and Ethiopia, amazing countries, so rich with culture and history and need. And we were there to go and serve that need. And I learned more about serving and contributing and getting out of my own way. And then I resigned in age 42. They always say that's the age. I think the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, 42 is the answer to the universe. At 42, I resigned because I'd been walkabout for 9 years. I hadn't seen any of my friends and family really. I was lonely. I wanted to settle and have a family of my own. Thought I'd better come home. I was in southern India. And one of my amazing brothers had said to me, there's a Zen master, Jesuit monk, running a Zen center in southern India. You need to go and meet him. So I went for a day and spent 2 months. Can you believe? I had a month of silence and a month of conversation, 8 hours of meditation a day. Amazing man, Anasami. And I sort of just went, wow. I turned left in life. I didn't know that was possible. And he helped me explore my inner regions and what was going on for me within, and gave me the gift of meditation, which I've had ever since, and a library to die for. So I was able to read and drink in, I think, knowledge and wisdom that I had never had available to me before. It was a beautiful gift. And I had some very powerful energetic experiences. My body sort of began to move, and occasions where I didn't quite know where I ended and the world began, which may sound strange to people, but it's direct experience. It's what happened for me. I wasn't on any medication. I wasn't taking any hallucinogenic drugs. I was just sitting and connecting to life. And it felt like I connected to the mains of life. And since then I came out, and those energetic experiences and that journey of deepening and inner conversations happened for the last 15 years, regularly at home. As my children sit on me as I meditate and flick my skin and say mosquito and just take me out of my zone. But I also then went into an organization called Leaders Quest, which you touched on. Yeah. Love international NGO. And we take senior leaders away on experiential journeys to challenge the existing mindset. So I was lucky enough to take people all over the world and meet other fellow leaders and invite them to have a conversation together as peers as to why they made the choices they did, how they found those choices, and how they held the line in the face of so much challenge. And I think I would have carried on doing that forever, actually. It's an amazing organization. But I resigned, still involved quietly, but I resigned primarily in 2018 to explore how consciousness, energy, and technology come together to create tipping points for change. Because I kept having that voice. It wasn't biblical. It wasn't like a voice of God talking to me, but I felt this inquiry. I thought, not do this. And my poor wife, who was looking at me saying, "You've just had our first child. We have no money because you're an idiot and you lost everything. And you're now going out into the world of uncertainty. And actually, I'll finish in a sec, but just a little story. So I resigned from Leaders Quest, worked out my notice, which is about 6 months. Of course, didn't give myself any time to find any work. And in the last month, Ella said, so it's our last salary this month. What's happening next month? It's like, I don't know. It'll be all right. She's, well, it better be. And I got a phone call from one of the trustees of Right to Sight, who I hadn't spoken to for ages, old friend, Norman. And he phoned up and said, you keep coming up in my dreams. I need to see you. And we met for 2.5 days in Bath and walked around Bath. And we had this beautiful conversation. He was trying to work through various things. And I was just a sort of walking companion, helping listen and hold that. And maybe on occasions had a question or two that could be useful. And at the end of it, he said, wow, I want to do more of this. In fact, why don't you walk me and my team every month? And so for the next 5 years, once a month, I'd walk one of his team members for a couple of days in person. And they looked after me very well. And suddenly I had a form of income that could act as a bridge between where I was and where I was going. And that was completely, lucky me. I mean, amazing how life is. But that's an example of, I think, just trusting the emergence and uncertainty and walking into it.
Wow. Well, what a beautiful story that is of summary of your life and your adventure. And then specifically what really touched me when I was listening is this last piece, when you are saying to yourself, something will happen, I trust life, and then something does happen. So what does it take for us to reach that level of deeper relaxation within the uncertainty, ambiguity? Because to be very honest with you, Simon, a lot of the business leaders that I'm coaching nowadays, and not only leaders, but employees within the organizations, people in small businesses, since COVID, are in that consistent conversation of not knowing, being afraid of the future, not being able to plan, not being able to strategize. Things are changing. People are living in that kind of anxiety, I would say. It's not anxiety, but there is this underlying the current of this tension and nervousness. And I really would love to kind of evolve through that in this conversation with you. What does it take? What took you, to arrive to that point when you can be saying to yourself, to your life, yes, everything will work out. And then your friend calls you and then you have a new work that you didn't know about. And how did that happen to begin with, from your perspective, when you reflect into your own life?
Yeah, I was so happy to. And also to share with you, even when things seemingly, for me, it's not that life isn't then therefore naturally easy and in flow. I mean, listen, I've been building Sarsen for the last 5 years or and 9 months ago, I had to close the commercial vehicle down because although we've got a beautiful product and I get lovely feedback and super fans, and I've been working with Pizza Hut and Accenture and Google and amazing companies, I couldn't scale it. I couldn't sustain it the way I was hoping. And shareholders have given me, lots of money. And I thought it's not fair to keep spending money that I can't. So, there's been further challenges and I'm having to deal with the consequences of that. So I would say that trust for me, of course, with all things comes in a number of layers. There's a layer of direct experience. When I lost everything, I don't think I was in any way trusting of life until I was able to meet life and it opened up and gave me, not necessarily what I was aware I needed, but it gave me something. It gave me that gift of moving to Spain and of friendships and of a quieter time and still yet living well. And once you have experience of coming out the other side, you can't help but know that that's true. And I've had a number of those experiences now, as I'm now dealing with Sarsen and its challenge. My lovely wife pointed out in a walk recently down the Thames, she doesn't have these experiences. So she's sitting in great uncertainty and disquiet about the intensity of our financial situation at the moment. And she says it's a funny thing because she knows by my having done this before, my sense is it'll be okay, but I don't know how. And she says, well, I trust you, but actually I also am questioning my trust of you because I trusted you when you built Sarsen, and 5 years on, you've come back and say we can't afford, bigger Christmas presents this year, that sort of thing. So it's not just even about the trust you have within yourself, it's then noticing that affects those around you. And all I can say, going back to this, is direct experience is a really good guide because it's true and you know it, whoever you are. It's not being told to you, you're not reading it. It's not someone else's story, it's yours. And we all have direct experience of coming out the other side of crisis.
Right.
So I feel start with that because it's only yours and it's a gift. And it happens again and again and again. So there's that piece. Just know it's always there for you. There's then the piece around how we grow as human beings. If we think of this amazing world as a university of life, which is what I always reflect on it as, then actually we are evolving and growing if we so choose. We may not choose to, some of us don't, and we get smaller and we shrink. But if we keep being curious and walk to our learning edge, the edge of who we are, then we grow. And what I've noticed is as we grow, we begin to be able to hold complexity in a different way. It becomes like we can have multiple things in our hands without being weighed down by it. And that's about, what's often described as consciousness. We expand our layer of consciousness, and it's totally possible. I watch it in my own life. I think I'm not the man today that I was in my 20s, my 30s, or my 40s. And that's because I've grown. And of course, there are continuing layers of growth available to me. One of the things that I've noticed is the sort of multidimensionality of life, that life is bigger than just me. I'm just aware of that now. And not from a sort of religious perspective or it's just true that the connectedness of life is absolutely apparent now to me, where before I didn't see connection.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, connection is such a gift. If you can be present. So that's something I wanted to speak to. I think it's very hard to trust life if you're not present. Because if you're not present, you spend the whole time in the past or the future, making lists or worrying about what you've done. And if you're present, which I feel like I am now with you, it's like you can connect to yourself in a different way, and therefore you can connect to whatever's in front of you, a person, an idea, a situation. Of course, if you can connect to it, then you can hear it and see it. And if someone's heard or seen, well, the connection is just stronger. And suddenly there's a space that opens up for something different to happen. It's amazing how that, but you can't do that if you're not present. And then once you're present and that connection's made, there's an energy that flows. You all felt it. And there's then the access to a creative, intuitive impulse that's always there. But often it's a happy accident because we don't pay attention to the possibility of it being more in our life. So I've noticed that in my own life. In the presence comes the creative impulse that can occasionally just be stay quiet, say nothing. Occasionally it can be a gentle touch, a holding of a hand of a small child, or, just gentle touch on someone's shoulder, a look. Occasionally it's a phrase, a comment, a story, a question. It doesn't really matter because the impulse comes through. And again, I've had that experience enough to trust that it's there and available to me. So that there's this direct experience, there's the expandingness of our own consciousness and awareness. It's the invitation for life to come through us creatively and intuitively. There's the connection that comes with that. And then I think there's a sort of playfulness. For me, I cannot change anyone. I realize that more and more. You can't change Zoran. But what I can do is I can constantly be growing myself. And in so doing, the ripple of me goes out into the world. And that I notice affects change. Whether it be soothing a crying child, talking to Ella about the uncertainty of our financial situation, dealing with shareholders and explaining why I can't repay their capital, whatever it is. But I can only do that from coming as me in my integrity. And if I do, as I do that, it's amazing the reaction that comes from the other. It's really interesting. And in the Sarsen story at the moment, it's a challenging one, Zoran, because I have a not-for-profit and a commercial vehicle. I'm basically closing the commercial vehicle. And of course, that affects the team, the council, the shareholders, the community, the clients. And it's dying well. I'm proud of that in some ways because there's no drama. There doesn't seem to be any anger. There's lots of support. People saying, you've tried hard. It hasn't worked. What are you going to do? Don't give up. Which is useful because sometimes I feel a little bit hard done by and self-pity and shame. So it's good to keep hearing it. It's fuel to allow me to keep walking. It's also really annoying because well, why didn't it work? but it's lovely because it's recognizing that things can die well to allow other things to come through. And what I observe in my walking into uncertainty and emergence is if I do it wholeheartedly, there is a possibility of something, but there is a wholeheartedness to it. And I use the word heart because it's an important aspect. Often think about leading life from the heart-mind, not the mind-heart. Our mind is amazing and beautiful and gifted and does so many things for us. But if it's our master and not our servant, it can create a lot of chaos in our system.
Of course.
So leading from the heart-mind feels like a great gift as you come into this emerging world and meet it where it's at.
Mm. And I love what you shared, that the first thing is experience. And I had that similar situation like yours when you lose everything and then you have to go through this rite of passage of trusting. And it happens to people in different ways, anything from losing a wallet while you're traveling, through being lost in a jungle, through, losing everything, losing business, losing relationships. So there needs to be some kind of sense of loss for us to be initiated. And I really agree to that, the life is not supposed to be comfortable all the time. I talked to somebody else the other day on the podcast and said we require those challenges to be able to experience that creative impulse and that connection, because out of that, as you said, the connection to yourself. You begin cultivating a deeper relationship through your presence, but then you access this creative impulse, this consciousness that works through you and with you to guide you forward. And without us struggling, we will be in the mind, right? We will never access the heart mind to be able to feel it. So I think those experiences are absolutely necessary, isn't it?
Yeah, it's spot on. And our life is as complicated today as it ever has been. And yet something, I feel more peaceful within me than I ever have done. And I sleep. I think that's I had a grandfather who was reasonably quite successful in life. And my youngest brother, his first ever job was to write obituaries for a newspaper in the UK. Strange job, but he did. And he happened to write an obituary about my grandfather. And he interviewed my grandmother and he said to her, what was it that was unusual about Grandpa? And she said, you know what? He slept well. He didn't take his anxieties and worries into the bedroom. And I think it's a rather amazing thing to say. But I didn't know him particularly well. I can't tell you about his life, but I can share that I feel peaceful inside of me, even with the uncertainty around me. And that feels a gift. And I recognize that fuels me for walking out into the day.
Mm-hmm. And where I would love to anchor further into this conversation is something that you really highlighted, that I could feel the energy rising when you were talking about it. This is presence. So I feel that your ability to sleep well, to anchor into uncertainty, comes from the deeper level of connection that we call presence. So how would you describe this to people who are listening, but they know this term, because now in personal development industry, leadership development, we talk about presence, we talk about leadership presence, we talk about being present in life, we talk about connection. But I know that some people who are loving this podcast, they're like, but what is that? How do you achieve that state? How does it feel for you when you're 100% present? Because I would love to have it, but some people don't know how to attain it or how to get into that space. So full presence.
I'll let you question.
How would you describe that?
Sure, I'll try and describe it. I'll try and describe it a little bit of the journey of how to find it. Look, I'll describe what it's not. Imagine standing in the kitchen on your phone with a 4-year-old in front of you crying. That is clearly not a present situation. And you lay down the phone and you get down on your knees and you hold that child and you give them what they need. So you are in the room and they know that you are with them. And when we have these extraordinary phones and computers and TVs and radios and everything else we have, it's a blocker. It's like a veil between us. So presence is when you are in the room, your own room, or in the room with others, and that you aren't running in the back of your, when you go to a party and you meet someone looks you in the eye and you think, oh, they are connecting to me. Someone looks over your shoulder and thinks, is there someone more interesting that I can talk to behind this person? They are not present to you. They are present to where they want to go, which is not talking to you. Presence is also a feeling within. If you have a very noisy mind that says, I've got to make a phone call, I've got a list of things to do, I'm really upset with my wife, no one's taken the dog out, who's buying supper? You are not present. I am not sitting present with you because I have an internal dialogue, like there's a party taking place in my head. And one of the things that I have become aware of for me is how to quieten my own racing mind. Because if I can quieten it and create more space, then actually I can connect to myself and to others around me. And there's many ways of doing that, but ultimately it's about a practice. There's a degree of responsibility and discipline. These things don't just happen overnight. I'm more present today because I've been meditating for 15 years. I think that's just true. I can't escape the fact that I found something that worked for me, but meditation is one of many ways of finding presence. It's a lovely way, but it's not everyone's cup of tea. Some people go for walks in nature. And as long as they're connected to nature, if you go for a walk in nature and listen to a podcast, you're not really connected to nature. You're having a nice podcast, So some people do breath work these days. A lot of breath work helps you become more present, quietens the nervous system. It's an amazing gift, breath work. Some people do tapping, emotional freedom therapy, another way of regulating the nervous system and becoming calmer. Some people do yoga, and some people do sound baths, and some people chop carrots quietly, because that's the way they become present. So I don't think we need to think about this as being, what is it in your day where you're in the room, you're here, and whatever that is, just keep doing more of it, and then remember it when you're not doing it, and in your relation to the other, because where's the slap on the forehead that says, hey, are you here?
Yeah.
Hello. What does it feel like? It feels kind of amazing because it feels energetic. You feel yourself. You feel a bit, maybe your body begins, many of us have numb bodies. We don't realize our body is telling us so much information. And practice of presence is to begin to unnumb your body. And feel things, and people can literally feel you. You know how again, if you're in a situation with someone, you can feel the energy of the other person, and sometimes it's like, whoa, they are pushing me away. They do not want me. Others are like, wow, I feel so like I want to stand by you because you're making me feel kind of great, even if you haven't said anything. And that's just true. We all know it. There's no woo-woo there. It's just true. So the feeling of presence is one of, for me, a peacefulness, a spaciousness, a connectedness. And with that, I always have a sense of excitement. It's like, oh, I wonder what's going to pop up now. How can I serve and contribute to what's in front of me? If I start with that language, it's amazing what plays out. Not how can I take something from this? What can I gain from this? If I start with that premise, maybe something in the short term works in my favor. But that's not really connection. It's not really presence. It's more manipulation.
Yeah. Manipulation, trying to get the outcome that you want to get, like manipulating life literally. And I think that the leaders are specifically challenged by that. A lot of the leaders would love to be present nowadays, but there is always an excuse. There's always an expectation. There is always a performance. There is always something that derives that presence into some kind of direction. And I love how you define it, because for me as well, this is all about our relationship to ourselves when it comes to you being able to, first of all, master your mind on a certain level, because mind can get you into the places. And then you also mentioned something that I also practice myself, which is deepening your connection to your heart. When the HeartMath Institute in California began doing all these wonderful researches around the coherence between the brain waves and how we think and what happens when we move into the connection with our heart and how heart can lead the way and how heart can help us become more present and what is the impact then on our leadership skills, for example, our effectiveness, productivity. It's actually much better than being only in the space of mind. So there is a direct link there, right?
But HeartMath are lovely. I love HeartMath. And so true. I mean, look, my sense of being a leader is about noticing our common humanity and guiding and helping people on their own journey. So, we're all humans having this shared experience. Well, then how do we connect? Because otherwise, what's the point? And to your thing about the heart, it's such a beautiful heart mind coming to heart. Often I find myself just energetically trying to move the focus out of my head and down into my body and my heart, because that way it just quietens. It literally just quietens me. And then I'm sitting in my body with my heart at the center. I find, I talked about carrots. I was in a board meeting with a very senior group of executives, global company in Paris this time last year. And we were talking about parent presence and telling stories. And one of the ladies there, it's quite funny. She basically said, "I'm never present." In a sense, it was a slight badge of honor. But then she also went, "I wish I was," which, I don't know how to be present. And she was the one who suddenly paused and went, "Apart from when I chop carrots," said, "that is when I have my best ideas and when I'm more creative than any other time." And we all laughed and went, "Well, we've got to bring carrots into the office. You just need to chop more carrots." But I'm joking. And yet I think it's, there's massive evidence now from the neuroscientists to say that roughly 6 weeks into any practice of 15 minutes a day, you build new neural pathways and old pathways drop away. So leopards can change their spots. All of us can create new neural networks. All of us can be dedicated to 15 minutes a day. Every leader has that capacity. It's just about what we prioritize. And if we choose to prioritize it and we notice the difference, we'll do more of it. And it can be that walk, that meditation, that carrot chopping, that yoga, whatever it is that you choose. Build the practice of presence. Build the practice of quietening and becoming aware of your inner state. And the more you do that and practice it, the more it then comes out into the life that you're leading.
And for me, that has direct connection to the topic that we started with, letting go of uncertainty and embracing ambiguity, and how this actually powers our growth. Because when we get into that level of presence, you describe it so beautifully that through this experience and presencing, you get into that space of this creative pulse of what wants to happen next to you and with you right now. And for me, it's always reassuring that there is this connectivity, that I know no matter what, the life has the way to emerge into something new, that if I was only to remove myself from from trying to manage and control it, it will do what it needs to do, right? So there's a very deep level that this uncertainty it's inviting us to contemplate, to live, to practice, which is that deeper level of trust and faith, and removing ourselves and allowing this creative impulse to come and then take the next step, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. And look, again, direct experience, I recognize that uncertainty is all around us. This world is an incredibly uncertain place at the moment, and therefore creates anxiety, frustration, worry, fear, even anger. When has that ever served us in relationship to the other? We know that those poisons we're drinking in because of the state that is being played out in front of us, but it's not going to help us achieve our leadership goals and success. We recognize that. So we have to understand that that's not a starting point for making decisions. That just creates more of the same. It manifests our internal state. And my way of sort of dissolving that anxiety is to become present and therefore trust what emerges in front of me in a continuous flow. Not judging it. If I start judging it and giving it a label, very quickly I create a form of separation. So there's a lovely friend of ours, a lady called Dr. Scilla Elworthy, who's had 3 Nobel Peace Prize nominations, one amazing woman, She's talked to her Zora, and just her own journey of life is incredible. And she says regularly, Simon, in my mid 70s now. Sorry, Zilla. She's talked about connection, not correction. That wherever she goes in life, if you can start from the place of deep listening and connection, not correction, you have the opportunity of actually allowing something new to form in front of you, irrespective to the uncertainty, which she's dealing with the whole time as she tries to build peace in places where there is, war. But I think that, and it only comes from the centered, present trust of walking into life and then connecting.
I just want this to ripple into this podcast, into the airwaves, into the frequency, so everybody can feel it, how you said it, because that was a lovely gift. Thank you so much for that.
Pleasure, Zora. Pleasure. It feels possible. I sit here. I'm in West London, and there's someone was murdered 2 streets away from us 2 nights ago. In the community here, I can tell there's fear. Yeah, the children in the local school are all talking about knives. This is in our, the lady in Sainsbury's, one of the supermarkets up the road, has told me there's been more abuse of them as staff this year than there has been ever in her memory. There's something happening in society at the moment at many levels. And I think you can get caught in it, or we can recognize that our role, particularly those of us who choose to be leaders, is to try and find a different path and know that that is only permissible if we start with ourselves. And I think that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. And, and that's why we all need to step up to the next level of leadership. And I know you have been working with that for a very long time, inspiring, leading, guiding, leading by example, leading teams, getting people to advance.
Getting it wrong and mucking up and, my wife saying, what are you doing?
But it's also part of experimentation of life. I think that, I would love to add this playfulness, because my way through this as well, I'm also following your process, and I'm with you when you speak about presencing and experiencing and then living the pulse of life. But I also think that playfulness has a very important, joyful contribution to our life by being able to experiment, being able to learn, to fail, to dissolve, to die well, to emerge into new, that the whole seriousness of our life, as we grow into life, become a little bit more stiff and serious, a little bit more serious, and a little bit more serious, and then eventually very serious. It's playfully here.
And so I spot on. I think I'm sure I was a little bit more worthy than I am a few years ago, and it must have been so annoying and boring for people. And I think having kids have been helpful. Not everyone has children, but you've got to be playful because they're on the ground and playing, and you connect to that joy.
Yeah.
I also feel it in myself, actually. I feel there's a sort of vibration. It's a strange thing to use the word vibration, but we all have it. Ultimately, life is about a vibration. Quantum mechanics and physics tells us that we're just a series of vibrations.
Yes.
And if we can, without being crass, maintain a highest vibration within ourselves, that will be felt by ourselves and others. And of course, you can't do that unconsciously.
Mm-hmm.
That's where there is a discipline and responsibility, which is also playful. It's not hard work, this. Once you begin to notice it works, it's actually really fun work. Mm-hmm. But it's hard work to start because the other side has said, I don't want this. I don't believe in this. This doesn't work. I don't know how to do this. I haven't got time for this. This doesn't make money for me. This doesn't answer my emails. So there's something about crossing that bridge between that voice of I can't, I won't, I mustn't, I can't, I'm not allowed to, into, oh, wow. And once you cross the bridge, you're actually more energized to stay the other side, even though occasionally you walk back, fall off the horse, get on, fall off the horse and get on. And I've noticed that in my life.
Thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. As we're coming close to, to the podcast, one of my female podcast directors, she told me that men on podcasts talk for 3 hours and 10 hours, and this is not how the podcast format should be. So she told me keep it within the format of 45 minutes, so all the women can listen to men talking and talking and talking. I was listening to the podcast; it was 3.5 hours. I was like, oh my god! And I know you and I can go for 3.5 hours. But I need to respect Joe, who always told me 45 minutes is the max. Anyway, as we're reaching towards the end of this wonderful conversation, how would you like to leave audience with? What do you feel inspired to give them as a call for action, maybe contemplation, maybe something to reflect on or carry out in their life?
Yeah, thanks, Oran. I would say one of my greatest gifts that I've been given in the last few years is beginning to understand that I own all my own rubbish. I own my stuff. I think the more ownership we can take, the more chance we have to resolve it, to be compassionate for ourselves and those around us. And I think that's a gift that we could all give ourselves this Christmas. Own your own stuff. Don't be a victim to others. Own your own stuff. And as you do, walk out with that joyful, playful edge that you described. Present and connect. Have a marvelous Christmas and New Year and enjoy some festival time.
Thank you so much for sharing us with that. Own your own stuff. I think that's a wonderful call for action for all of us. I'm going to say yes to it immediately. I know I need to own a little bit more of my own stuff. Sometimes we don't want to, there's
No, we don't. Of course, it's much easier to say it's yours, not mine. I blame you.
Discipline, responsibility showing up in your life. We covered a lot. So thank you so much, Simon, for joining us. And we're really, really grateful for your energy. And thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. We're super grateful for our community growing and expanding. We're super grateful for people sharing this podcast and commenting and loving what we present week after week. So thank you so much for being part of this community. And once again, Simon, thank you so much for being so authentic, vulnerable, warm, inspiring, wisdom holder. We learn a lot.
Thank you. Listen, loved you and all the family.